All right. So, uh, you wanted to debate, what was it, social democracy?
Yeah. Let me just read what you wrote. Social democracy through a balanced mixed economy promotes innovation and social welfare.
Yep, that's my proposition. So, what would be your argument against that?
What you wanna give like your opening statement?
You can go first. I don't really have like a written out opening statement, but
I don't have one either, but I would say that um, so the innovation part. I'm particularly interested in what you have to say because I actually study that.
so
Um,
the
I have
in,
been studying that.
the innovation is from the capitalism, right? So the capitalism creates the innovation as we all know that happens currently in our society. All pretty much most of the innovation comes from capitalism, and
So so not the government or the mixed economy, but the capitalist side.
not all of it comes from capitalism, but there is innovation that comes through capitalism.
So yeah, I would be surprised if you have a lot of points that say otherwise, but so that's great that we can start off this way with regards to social welfare and social democracy. I would just make the case that um, the European model of social democracy, or the economic model of social democracy in Europe, I would say is failing. Um,
So
we in Europe, and I
specifically,
mean, one
what?
second, let me just get the statement across. So in Europe and in the UK, I'm in the UK, we've been essentially stagnant economically since 2008. In fact, in the UK, GDP per capita was higher in 2007 than it is today. Um, we have an issue with uh, a variety of green energy policies that are currently deindustrializing Europe and especially Germany. And it's very difficult for the social welfare element of it to be funded if the economy is not growing. So, for example, the NHS in my country, which is a socialized national healthcare, needs about 4% year on year to fund itself. So each year it needs 4% more and more, and the economy is only growing at 0.1%. So it's effectively unsustainable. And I can make some other points which I can make throughout the debate, but that's essentially the idea that in practice we've reached the end of the line for this sort of economic and political ideology.
Okay, so I mean, I would disagree with that because you all you cited basically was what's happening in the UK, and but you say the EU model, right? The UK isn't representative of the entire EU. When I would actually cite other EU countries like the Nordic countries like Sweden, Denmark, Norway, and I would cite them as examples of socialism working with capitalism to effectively create better quality of life, higher life expectancy, and in those countries also they also rank high in economic uh, innovation.
Okay, I can discuss the Nordics, but first let me answer the point with the EU. I would say that the United Kingdom, while slightly more liberal, is not a million miles away from what any other European nation is. Certainly not in terms of social welfare. I mean, some people will argue, but it's not a million miles away. I would say that more or less the whole continent has pluses and minuses, but they're similar. Um, the EU itself, recently, with regards to economic stagnation, which is also affecting Europe as a bloc. There was a recent report by the EU on productivity by a guy called Draghi, who basically said that if the EU doesn't change course dramatically and invest a lot more, because the European Union is not attracting capital investment from private companies, he sort of recommended that all European countries, which UK is now no longer a part of, invest 5% of their GDP in itself in basically tech companies, and Europe, for example, completely skipped the whole tech industry. They're not competing globally at all. There's some companies here and there, but basically the industry that has the most money, that can afford to pay very high salaries to its employees, that completely bypassed the European Union. So in terms of at least admitting that productivity is bad in the EU from this report that the EU produced, and the fact that things are stagnating and things will seem worse in 2030, uh, I'll have to at least ask if you agree with that. And once we establish that, I can speak specifically about the Nordics.
Uh, well, I mean, what essentially do you want me to agree to?
That the EU as a bloc is stagnating.
Um, I mean, out of,
You want me to specify like
yeah,
economic
a
growth
little
and
more, yeah, because like I mean,
so I'll specify on 2 points: economic growth and productivity, and you know, real GDP, if you'd like. 3 points.
you're citing what as evidence of that?
The well, you can see for yourself. Real GDP, you can just Google that. Economic growth, if you look at it as a whole, um, some countries do better, some countries do worse, but as a block, it's essentially kind of flatlined. It's UK as an example. At least UK up to 2020 was in the EU, and I mentioned since 2008, and you can cite the report for stagnating productivity, which in turn relates to economic growth and capital investment. If there isn't the possibility of growth, then companies won't invest in the European Union. They'll invest in other countries.
All right, so yeah, I mean, I guess as a whole, I'll say that stagnation is definitely occurring, but I don't see how this relates to socialism, or like a mixed economy, like social democracy as a whole, because
Well, so
you
I
know,
wouldn't call it I wouldn't call social welfare socialism. In fact, I think socialist would well, socialists they vary, but like I think the more hardcore socialists would be against that because if you remember, Bismarck in Germany in like 1890, when he decided to install some of these welfare policies, it was to prevent socialism. I think I don't remember the exact quote of what he said. It was something like some sort of Christian Christian something to appease the
well,
voters so they won't be more socialist. So I wouldn't associate welfare with socialism
well,
outright.
like you said, it varies. So like, there's different types of socialists. So like, you know,
Right, but if you would you agree with me that if you put all these welfare policies and they keep delaying the socialist revolution, then that is counter the idea of socialism.
not necessarily, because you can socialists can believe like in different forms of socialism, right? So like, I'm a socialist because like I want I do want the government to like have its role in certain like aspects like healthcare. Like I think that like hospitals should be like publicly owned, not privately owned, and like other stuff. Like is I think it, I mean, to put it to you like this, right? If your taxes go to paying towards uh police departments, fire departments, you know, why are we for like healthcare, you pay for the, ambulances, usually they're like, public part of the public emergency whatever. And we but as soon as we take that person to, somewhere for care, or even in the prison system, we have privatized prisons over in the US. So like why are we privatizing what we do with people as soon as like they're done, asking for help? Well, you would think when you call 911, you're calling the government, but I mean, you're just calling the government for a ride to a private institution in that essence. So I think that these institutions should be publicly owned if we're going to be publicly funding transportation of citizens to them.
Well, I'm not exactly sure with regards. Okay, so I'll just like define what I see as the role of government, I guess, in this context. I think that the police, the court system, the army should be part of the government. I include prisons. I would include prisons in that as well. I don't know why you have private prisons. But basically, the idea is that the government has the monopoly on force, and no one else, like no gangs or militias can, override the government. The government, and there shouldn't be a market in force. I don't believe that you can have a like if you didn't have the government protecting your rights, and then you have to have like a sort of bidding between agencies for protecting your rights. I don't think that is a good idea. That's a longer argument that maybe it's
So you
not
believe
worth in this
in
one.
big government or small government?
I believe in a limited role of the government that could be a small or medium-sized government, but the role is more defined, more fixed.
What do you see the government's role as?
Like I said, police, court, army, prisons.
That's about it.
Yeah.
Uh, so I mean,
I mean,
as a
this is the sorry, can I just preface? This is like the ideal, and I probably will never reach the ideal in my lifetime. But and I'm more focused personally on deregulations, and because I see those as very very harmful. But I don't, for example, fight anymore. I mean, I don't exactly fight anymore for reduced taxes, or I would like reasonable taxes. But I fight for like deregulation and perhaps removing government offices that are not needed.
okay, so what if we could essentially? So do you think that we tax fairly?
I have no idea. You
So
you personally, I don't know.
I mean, I would say that we not in the United States, we don't tax fairly, and I feel
Sorry, what is fairly?
uh like equally, like proportionally to your income or your
I don't know if
wealth.
that's I don't know if that's I don't know if that's necessarily fair.
You don't think that's
Are you asking me
necessarily fair?
progressive taxation is a good idea? Is that the question?
I mean, well, so like in the United States, like majority of the tax income comes from like people paying into their Social Security. But then if you look at like the split up, corporations don't pay nearly as much as like, people pay from their like their day-to-day paychecks. I think
Well,
that if we have,
pro-
corporations making billions of dollars, that it shouldn't be that much of a gap.
so corporations, it's corporations are not well, and I think the corporations are not really an entity in and of itself in this context. They are in other contexts, but in this context, And I think a lot of economists agree with what I'm about to say is that essentially when you tax corporations, you're essentially taxing one or all of three people: the employees, the shareholders, and the customers. Because one of them has to some of them has to fork over the money. The corporation, unless it has like some kind of large war chest which it can pay the taxes of, but like on an ongoing basis, if you increase taxes of corporation,
Yeah,
then it comes out of those people.
it would be the shareholders.
Okay.
So like like they're so basically the problem with them not my argument would be that the shareholders don't pay their fair share of taxes because they make plenty of income from holding those shares, but I feel like they're not being
But
taxed.
can I just point out that when you say shareholders, the vast majority of people who are shareholders are people who hold pensions.
Well,
Like essentially, if you look at a capitalist economy, you have like a sort of I'm not sure if conveyor belt is
not
necessarily the
not
right word, but you start your career
it depends
on
on
like
what company we're talking about here.
okay, but I'm talking about in general, like as a human being, you start your career as a teenager at the beginning of your career, right? You work minimum wage and you earn on you or you train yourself or you educate yourself, and then you continue your career, you get paid, and then over time, ideally, some of that money goes towards a pension. Those pensions invest in our shareholders or invest in other companies, and they accrue money on your behalf over time, so that when you finish your career, when you're about to retire, you become a proper capitalist, as in you stop working and you live off your capital, which is investing in other companies. So those are why, for example, the government doesn't necessarily tax these people too much, and because it's trying to promote capital investment, and capital investment is helpful for everyone.
Well, obviously the money is somewhere within these corporations, wherever they're taking they're getting their income revenue stream. My focus would be taking the money on the people who have the most, right? So the people who have the most money would definitely be paying the most taxes. That's just that's equal to me because it, there's no reason for like why you can't do that if you're like the wealthiest person. There's no reason why you can't be taxed the most because it's like unless you're using the
So I can
money
give you
to
a
accrue.
reason.
Well, I mean the only reason that I would see to allow somebody to hold or well I would call it hoard capital is to like accrue more in the in having the goal of donating that or using it for some type of charitable reason.
Well, so okay, you have to look at it a bit objectively, right? So a lot of the people who have the most, and if you look at like the top 20 richest people in the world, most of them are successful company founders. They founded the company, and when they founded the company, they own shares in that company. At some point, the company is publicly traded, and the value and because they hold shares in a lot of shares in their company, then their personal wealth is valued on those paper shares. Basically, what it means is that they hold pieces of paper that other people are willing to pay X amount of money for, and the total amount is their wealth. But that's like basically speculation on the value of those shares. Um, so if you tax a lot of them don't sell it. They just hold on to the shares either because they want to keep a controlling share in the company, or I don't know, they don't want to get taxed, so they don't necessarily sell those shares. But if you were to tax them on those shares, do you want to tax them even if they didn't sell them?
Even if they did no. So well it would matter what their intent is like to like if you're gonna sell them, then it has to be to with the intent to accrue more capital to eventually use that to donate to a charitable reason, right? So
Okay,
if
but if
if
but right now they're so let's say right now their shares are just in their own company, and once they sell them, they'll have to pay quite a bit of tax, like 30. I don't know, what are you guys on? 37%?
I don't know, but
39%?
let's just say they gotta pay uh what like what would be my
Well, if
stance on that?
13, if it's like let's say 39%, that's you lose quite a bit, right? So it's not like you withdraw it from the company, and then you invested in somewhere else because you just lost 40%
Well,
anyway. So
my 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 biggest concern is that like there's money being thrown around here, right? Obviously, the problem is we gotta figure out where it's going. I know a lot of it goes passed down through inheritance, and
okay.
I would put a cap on inheritance, like anything over 1 billion, you ain't getting that, you ain't passing that down, because no, why does somebody need more than $1 billion to be passed down to them? I mean, that's just if you can't
Oh,
make
so
it.
what? Sorry, why do rich people need this much money? Is the question?
Well, no, I would just ask like that as like a general question to anyone who would be opposed to putting an inheritance cap at 1 billion.
1 million or 1 billion?
1 billion.
Well, the inheritance tax of 1 billion, I can argue about inheritance tax in the UK because it's not 1 billion.
No, I'm not talking about a tax.
It's half a million, and that kind of like
I-
catches
I'm not
almost
talking.
every
I'm not talking
almost
about a
everyone.
tax. I'm talking about a cap.
You know,
Anything,
I oh, okay, so I
any,
understand.
yeah, anything over 1 billion would be given to the government to, or well, donate it to like a charity, basically.
Well, I can make an argument that why we should not tax billionaires and let them keep their money,
How
if
about
you'd like.
what about like passing it down?
Well, let me first make this argument, then I can discuss
Okay,
about passing it down.
okay.
So I would argue that they need that money to invest in other companies, which would be future productive companies. So they can act as either angel investors, or they can act as accumulating a large amount of capital for something that will take many, many years to pay off. And it needs a lot of capital investment upfront, and they're not going to get that money from banks or from governments or anything like that. They need to put the money up front. So, for example, I'll give you two examples. So, for example, Elon Musk wants to fly to Mars, and he has said that he's accruing like all this capital to be able to fund that because it's not a profitable endeavor that he can get money from investors, because investors won't invest in a potentially money losing prospect, and certainly not governments, because they'll have other priorities, and certainly not, maybe not in even individuals. So he's just accruing capital to be able to achieve his dream of humanity being a spacefaring race. And another example, I don't know if you're aware of this, but Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, said that if we want to take AI seriously, and we need the infrastructure, and the infrastructure here is a very, very broad term. It's not just graphic cards that process AI. It's a lot of other things.
Yeah, data
If
centers and stuff like that.
he said we need something like $7.3 trillion. So even if you grab like all the billionaires together, that's still not $7.3 trillion. It's not even half that. Um,
Well,
and it's not something anyone else is going to pay. And if we have this investment in AI, that will like super accelerate AI for everyone on the planet, then that would be pretty cool.
so I agree that that would be pretty cool, but I think that we have a lot of problems in our world that are more important than just going to fucking Mars. I think that people starving, people homeless on the streets, out in the cold, people dying, people die every day.
Okay, so I understand your point. Can I just ask you something? So here we have, where is your focus basically for society? Are we going to focus on
fixing
Are we going to
the
focus on
biggest.
progressing society
Yes,
forward, or are we going to focus
yes.
on making
So
sure like everyone is equal?
So basically, yes, it would be very progressive. First, we got to fix, the biggest problems: homelessness, people fucking hungry. Education is a big one. We got to get people educated, and as soon as we're at the point where we can confidently say, hey, we're either close as fuck to solving these problems, or we solved them. And then at that point, that's when we can, start funding things like fucking space exploration. I do want to explore. We need to explore space. We need to build a fucking Dyson sphere so we can, start harnessing the sun's energy directly, and instead of using fossil fuels, use the fucking nuclear fusion reaction going on in the middle, right in our solar system.
Okay, so I would say this. I would say that I'm not entirely disagreeing with your point, but I would say that the most productive people in society know where to invest resources in the most productive way. I don't think the government does that at all. I think it's in fact the reverse. And I would add that, in my opinion, that the issues that you've raised are not issues that more money can solve. I think they're to do with bad bad management or mismanagement and regulations.
So, uh, I would agree that there is a lot of bad regulations, but I would disagree that the government is like less capable than like these billionaires. The government is loaded with cash. Like
Sure.
we spend billions just on like one aircraft carrier. Like
Yeah, the government has more money than
yeah,
most rich people
yeah,
together.
that's like chump change to us. You know what I'm saying? So we got to the moon just to fucking race, Russia, because we wanted to beat
Hmm.
them there. You know,
Yeah,
all it is it's about motive, right? If there's incentive for the government to do stuff, then it can do it.
I don't think it can.
Why not?
I don't think the government can do very much. I mean, besides its the de facto role that I've said it should be doing, I don't think it can do very well other things.
Why not?
It's very inefficient. It's basically a bureaucracy. You're saying, can a fully centrally planned or semi-centrally planned uh, bu uh, bureaucracy be able to carry something out efficiently and in a cost-effective way? And I say no, it cannot.
I mean, but there's evidence that like we can do that. I cited us landing on the moon.
So us landing on the moon is a unique case where it was like we had like a particular mission and we wanted to achieve that. Sorry, the Americans wanted to achieve that. And at the time, Americans had a sort of brain trust of people, like a very talented people that were all on board to get this thing done. Now, the brain trust has definitely moved to the private sector without question. And in fact, I don't think that I would say it's depleted severely in every Western democracy, really, in terms of the bureaucracy. There are some genuinely motivated people in government, but the bureaucracy, the red tape, the complexity, the million and one stages you need to get anything done, which some of them are political, some of them are uh, just very difficult to get approvals for. Yeah, it will be very difficult to get those things done efficiently, and over time they'll just cost more and more, which I can actually point out that things that the government gets in sectors, sorry, in the economy that the government gets involved in, either in terms of regulation, subsidies, taxation, or generally just a, let's just say, high intervention, those sectors of the economy become more expensive over time. I'm thinking healthcare, I'm thinking higher education. Off the top of my head, in the UK and Europe, it will be energy sector. Whereas things that don't have a lot of government interventions, like mobile phones, software, games, communication, computers, those things go down in price over time, which is the default position of a market. You find, you use innovation, you do productivity improvements, things go either the price goes down outright, or it stays the same and there's a lot more improvement to the same, like a lot more value to the same thing.
So, I would argue that, as you said, like the brain trust, the reason that we got to the moon, I would argue against that because, I mean, there's still, I don't think that people have like moved to the private sector. I think that like there is a lot of smart people in the private sector, but there's still plenty of people in the public sector as well. I just think that NASA overall, has a very high standard for who they hire. If you want to become an astronaut, it's not you can just something you can do overnight. It's a there's very high standard. You gotta go to college, get your, degree. You gotta have, perfect vision. You gotta know how to like fly shit. You gotta be in the avionics. You gotta be in the physics, engineering. There's really high bars for getting into NASA, and I think that was the reason why we were able to achieve what we did. I don't think it was just because uh like that we just got like lucky because we just had like people that were just motivated to do it. It was because
Oh, look at it now, right? So NASA couldn't get anything out to space since the Columbia incident in I think 2008, 2010, I forget.
well
And at some
that's
point,
because of lack of
but
funding.
we're just a second. At some point, they went to the private sector, SpaceX being one of them, and said, "Can you please? We'll give you some upfront money to help you get started as investment. Can you please send stuff send satellites to space for us because it's difficult?" And they did SpaceX and BAE and and over time B cost like 80 times more, and SpaceX, which was still a lot cheaper than how much it cost NASA to send someone into space. And then at some point, like SpaceX got to a position where it's 1/12 the price to send something into space than NASA did. And that's not that those improvements are not something you're gonna see in the public sector. In fact, there's no motivation to become more efficient over time in the public sector.
Well, I think that just goes down to like a social systemic problem. Right now, the reason that NASA had so much funding, uh to get to the moon was because everyone was talking about it. Oh, we're gonna go to the moon. Kennedy, you had Kennedy doing his speech. We're gonna go to the moon, and like you said, everything went downhill after the Challenger explosion, which was like a huge tragedy because that was an event that people were excited to see, and it was just bad. That was, but you want to talk about bad luck? That was bad luck because if that was successful, the the hype around space exploration probably would have been pretty well alive. At least with NASA's reputation on the line there, because that really was like a big fuck up in the public perception area. But their main issue with like getting stuff out into space is just like they 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 don't they don't have enough funding. Like they are relying on the government, and
But
without public interest, they're not going to receive
but
funding.
okay, but i- SpaceX is sending stuff into space at 1/12 the price. They don't need as much funding, and plus they're like sending how often are they sending stuff into space now? Like 100 times a year? It's insane. And every time they reverse back on Earth, they reverse it in like a standing position for the rockets, and or like they're caught in like these two giant steel chopsticks in midair. Like that's not something that you could have done with NASA. They wouldn't even need to think about it. Like you just destroy everything, and you land with like a pod or like or like a just a ship out of it, and a lot of that isn't reusable. So yeah, if you have these efficiencies, I mean, and again, you would simply not have seen these efficiencies in price, and therefore the ability to continuously many times a year go into space that you would see in the public sector. So it's not a matter of funding. I mean, obviously, it's easy to get funding when it's 1/12 the price.
Well, I mean, I think that NASA is definitely, trying to like cut corners and just get
Right,
shit
but
out in
cut
this.
corners, but we don't want them to cut corners, do we?
Yeah, no, I don't.
We
But
want them to be as safe as possible.
absolutely, and which is why I think that we need to be allocating more money to them. Their budget's only 27 billion. Comparing that to the fucking defense budget of 142 billion, I mean, come on, like that doesn't even compare.
Well, why are you comparing?
Well,
Well,
because
but
because
the thing
because
is, the thing is, the thing.
because hold on, because I'm comparing them because these are like what we allocate our budget to is very reliant upon public interest. If tomorrow everyone in the
Okay,
United
okay,
States said I care more and more about space exploration than military, then the that would start to even out.
I appreciate that, but what I'm saying something else. What I'm saying is, wh- and I'm comparing it to the private sector. Why don't these organisms or or these large bureaucracies, which I'm sure NASA by now has a massive bureaucracy, ab- aside from its actual functions of going into space, right? I'm sure by now it accrued over the 50 or 70 years that it's been around. It has a very large bureaucracy. Why don't these systems become more efficient and cheaper over time, which is something you would see in the private sector? Because
Well,
and the answer is that they have no incentive to. In fact, they
no,
have more and
that's
more regulations over time. They have less incentive to be more efficient with costs.
so the reason for it is because research and development is very expensive. Okay, so
Private
the
sector spends 4 times more on R&D than the
I
government
know
does.
exactly. Okay, so what we have here like you were saying how Elon Musk he wants to he it's his motivation to get to Mars, right? He has initiative, right? The problem that we're seeing with the government is the government is just representing the people basically their opinion, their interests, right? So if we're saying that the government doesn't want to spend money on R&D like SpaceX does, that's showing that the people do not want to spend that much on space exploration, and that's a problem that I agree with, which is why we need to fucking educate people.
I think that so let's take SpaceX for example, right? So Elon Musk had a engineering wish to reuse rockets. Okay, he said it will be cheaper to land rockets like in reverse, like pencils coming from outer space, and land the pencils straight up on the ground. And if they do that, then if they achieve that engineering feat, then they'll be in a very good position. So that was an innovation that he wanted. That's not something that NASA would have come up with. And you could say that, let's say that SpaceX was like a startup, and
Well,
startups innovate more, or something along those lines.
well,
But once he achieved that innovation, like it got him a huge benefit. Would you think that those sorts of innovations would come from the private sector?
So there's a specific reason why I would say that it wouldn't, and there was a reason why we didn't. So that was always like a route that we could have taken. The reason that only Elon did that is because that was a really risky way to like it was going to require a lot of blown up fucking rockets that we
Sure,
didn't feel like
but
we had the
but the
money to blow on.
entrepreneurs take these,
Well,
but
Elon felt like
entrepreneurs
he.
take these risks.
Well, I know we have to take these risks if we want to get progressive. So like this just affirms my point that this is like a public interest problem. This isn't the fact that the government is incapable of doing these things. It's just that the people of the government don't feel that this is worth their money, what they're worth their tax
No,
money.
I think they're risk averse.
The risk
They are
what's
risk averse.
risk avulse?
Averse, they are against risk. They don't like risk. Risk averse.
Who? The
The
people?
government, bureaucracies.
I mean, sure to yeah, pretty much. I
No,
mean, because
to a large extent, they are very they are. Def- uh, I think that's
I,
part of the
I don't know.
core.
I don't know though, because I would disagree with that notion. Because not in all forms. No, I mean, we got politicians today saying the most wild shit I've ever heard in my entire life.
Right. The politicians say the most wild. Okay, so there's a difference between the politicians and the bureaucracies that actually
Well, that's
the
why I say
unelected
not
bureaucrats who actually
all.
do the stuff.
Yeah, that's why I say not all forms of it.
Right, but again, from my point of view, at the very least, the unelected bureaucrats are the one who run the day-to-day stuff. You have the politician who has like some sort of grand ambition or not so grand ambition that sets some sort of policy, and the people who actually do it or implement it are the unelected bureaucrats. And there's tons of them, right? And I think they are risk averse. Definitionally, because of the way bureaucracies are structured, they are risk averse. And I would even say they are so risk averse that the are you familiar with something called the precautionary principle?
No, I
So
think I've heard of it.
so the precautionary principle basically says that you, let's say you want to develop something, you're in the private sector and I'm in the government, and I follow the precautionary principle. You have to prove to me that what you're trying to develop won't hurt anyone, won't harm anyone in 20 years from now.
So it's
How do you
like
do that?
it's basically you're saying it's too high of a bar for anything to get done.
It's a very, very high bar, yes.
Well,
And it's also the reverse. Like it's not the case that you first have to make a mistake or make like a huge fuck up and then pay for it. You have to prove that you won't fuck up in the next 10 years. And how do you prove that? You don't even really know.
I mean, I don't. I mean, I don't think you're talking about. This is an issue with bureaucracy, right? Like the. I don't really
Well,
have.
yes,
I mean, but that's not really what the debate is about.
but the government equals bureaucracy. That's its thing.
What type of equivalence is that? How do you expect me to? How what?
You what do you think the government is made up of?
Well,
It's made up of politicians, right? I accept that. But who like does the stuff? Who's the vast majority of the government? What is it made out of?
it's workers, it's constituents.
It's bureaucrats.
I mean, but I wouldn't. I wouldn't label everyone that's in
Most people. I
every.
would maybe not every single person, but the vast majority.
No, I don't think that they have to take the. Well, still, I don't see how this is relating to like socialism or like a mixed
Well,
economy and democracy. Like
so
this isn't a debate about government.
I'll relate it for you. Would you say the USSR had a very large bureaucracy?
I don't know too much about the USSR. I would say
Just
from
like
what I
okay, so
know, I would
yeah.
say I would say probably not. I heard they were getting a lot of shit done. So if
Okay,
you're saying
did
bureaucracy slows that shit down, then no.
Okay, how would you, let's say the idea of socialism is to not have money, right? Just that's part of the core idea. So it's like a moneyless society, moneyless, classless
So what
society.
are you, a communist?
No, I'm not. I'm
Oh.
just explaining to you the idea of socialism
No,
and how
that's not socialism.
it,
That's communism.
that's communism. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but you want to start at socialism. You want to sorry, you want to do the revolution to get away from capitalism. Then
No,
you want to spend
no.
25 years. Hold on. Then you
Ain't
want
no-
to spend 25 years in socialism, getting people acclimated to sharing and all that stuff. And then you want to move to capital to sorry to communism as the final stage.
Fuck no, what are you talking about? I'm not a communist.
Right. I'm not saying you are. I'm just saying that's the Marxist-Leninist approach to things.
Oh yeah, yeah, sure. Yeah, that's the
Okay.
Marxist approach.
Sure. So, um, what was I saying? So basically, if you get rid of money, so okay, so let's say with money, you and I, there's money in society. You and I want to make a trade, and you say you want to sell me your car for $1,000. Now I am making a decision based on the information you've given me that the car is worth $1,000, and to me, I have a set amount of money and I can choose how to invest it locally, right? So I'm making the decisions for myself. And think of a society as like these sort of decisions are made by billions of people locally at the same time. So it's like a distributed supercomputer, and everyone's making like a decision locally. If you were to take away money, you would have to centrally plan the economy. Everything would have to happen from the state, telling people how many cars to make, how many apples to grow, how much steel to make, and then where to send it, and how quickly, and all that sort of. All that has to happen from the state, and for that you need a lot of bureaucrats.
I don't think you need bureaucrats.
You need people to plan the economy, right?
I mean, yeah, to an extent you do, but like,
And you
you
need
don't need
and you
it. You
want
don't
people to
need it
plan
to
the
be.
economy. You want people to plan the economy following a certain set of rules and guidelines, right? Because you don't want someone to just say, "I'm going to send my house, billions of gold and ignore the rest of the economy." You don't want people to have like power, that kind of power. You want it all standardized. You want it all based around rules, right? So you don't have these like aristocrats popping up in the government and stuff like that.
I don't think you have to be an aristocrat, but like you just like
No, no, like
the
like
government.
corrupt. But let's just say corruption, right? You don't want corruption. You don't want people who control the flow of stuff in the economy to just like pile money into their own pockets. So you want to follow like a set of guidelines.
Sure.
Okay, so you start forming a bureaucracy. That's how it starts.
I like you're putting it in such an absolute form though.
Well, that's how because I study how organizations work.
Well, it like what does this have to do with the with like it does it just because just because our government so what like what is the counter to this? You're saying like are you an anarchist
What is the counter to
to
uh
that social
to
democracy
so
is
the
like
counter to central planning is to have decentralized like people making decisions like in the
yeah
case of
so
money. That would be the counter.
so no government.
No. I There is a government. There's just no economic central planning.
And what does that look like?
People trading with money, making decisions for themselves, decentralized.
With I don't even understand how that's supposed to work.
Individuals making decisions for themselves, decentralized. If you either have like individuals making their own decisions with the money they have in their pocket
So
based on like how
what
to
currency
allocate
does the
resources.
government use?
Sorry.
What currency does the government use?
Right. I'm just giving the example of like one extreme to the other. So the USSR trying to not have money. If you don't have money, then someone has to plan the economy. Just that's just how it will have to work.
So I don't understand like I don't understand where you're going with this.
Well, I was just giving an example that the USSR had a lot of bureaucracy
Okay,
because it did because one of its goals or long-term goals was to not have money, to have a classless, moneyless society.
but
It
that's a
didn't
communist
achieve it
society.
didn't
You're
achieve
giving me
everything.
a communist example.
Well, that was, they took that stuff seriously. They took the whole ideology very seriously. So that was the long-term goal. And to do that, they tried, certainly they tried to collectivize
They
farms,
tried
collectivize
they tried in the
industry.
wrong way. They
No, no,
did
it will. I would argue that it would always end up this way. You'd need to centrally plan the economy. Sorry, and you need to do it within the government. Now you can say bureaucrats, you can say heads
no,
of
do
workers or
democracy. Do
Soviets.
no democracy decides that.
You want the people to do a referendum on how to allocate how to control the economy,
Yes,
but they
direct
can't make
influence.
that many decisions that quickly.
Well, the
Plus, they're not experts.
well, in what economic decisions are like I'm talking about long term economic decisions, right? So like
You can make goals, sure,
right, like long
but
term ones.
the people, but yeah, yeah, but again, it's the same thing with the bureaucracy. You have someone making the policy, making the long-term goals, and the bureaucrats are the ones that implement it.
Okay, they're administering it, right?
Yeah, but they are the ones who control things happening in the economy. As the more power you give them, the more things they control.
Well, then they're subject to regulation.
Sure, they are very risk
Transfer.
averse. They'll follow.
No, no,
They
no, no, no.
you'll never get a situation where you can blame any one of them.
I'm not saying like they just need to have transparency in what they do. That's all.
They can have transparency, but at the end of the day, things as with centrally planned economy, things will break down over time. You'll see more and more stagnation. You'll see less and less innovation. You'll see less economic growth. Things cost more. Things become more inefficient. That's what you'll see with these
So
sorts
what
of
about
systems.
so you never really got to the Nordic model. So what's
What do I have an issue with it? No, yeah, okay, sure. So the Nordic model. So I said like Europe as a whole is stagnating, and the Nordic model bec- has the following issues. I don't think it's replicatable because these are essentially small countries. There's countries 5 million or less, with the exception of Sweden.
why does that matter?
They are they because I'll explain. These are small countries that have their own characteristics. They have less less complicated systems because there are just fewer people. So it's easier to administer a socialized healthcare system when it's only, let's say, 1 million people in Estonia. But if it's 67, 70 million people in the UK, it's several orders of magnitude more complicated. And you can have more mistakes, less efficient decisions, worse resource allocations as a result of this. The other thing I would say with the Nordic country that isn't replicatable is they are high trust societies, and that isn't everywhere else in the world. And I think there was one more, but essentially their ideas do not scale to bigger countries.
So, I mean, I don't see what your problem is with their population because they're not that small. You know, Sweden has a population of like 10.5 million. Denmark at like
Yeah,
6
I
million.
excluded Sweden.
Well,
5.4, but okay.
no, 5.9. And then
Okay, sure.
Finland at like 5.5.
Yeah,
Norway
these
at
are small countries,
5.3.
definitionally. These are definitionally small countries. Because
What,
then
you
I
want
could
to get
just say,
semantical? Come on.
no, no,
There's
no, no.
millions of people.
Right. So the reason why, okay, so the reason why those defined as small countries is because small countries have a set of properties that come with them. So small countries typically, and Norway is a good example, they can't grow or produce everything themselves, so they have to be very open to trade because just in, let's say in the case of food, they can't produce all the food that they need. It's very cold. It's a lot of the climate there isn't conducive to wheat, for example. So they need to be very open from a free market point of view to then be able to get things that it doesn't have. It typically relies on a larger country to provide military support, so they don't allocate so much money into their own military funding. And the bureaucratic systems that it has are far smaller and are more efficient because they're less complex.
So basically, you're just saying that they're different. So like,
Let
all
me
right,
let me let me give you an example. Let me give you an extreme example. Okay, would you say that communism in the countries that tried to implement communism, would you say that it worked or not?
hell no, not a single one.
Okay, so let's say the countries that tried it were like, I don't know, large countries, 100 million people,
Well,
50 million people. Yeah.
my problem with that statement though is that I've talked to a couple different communists, and
Okay.
a majority of the countries that have tried communists were Marxist Leninists. You know, so
Yeah.
there's other types of communists. There's like anarcho communists, and they're pretty
Yeah.
fucking
Oh,
progressive.
sure. Okay. But with regards to, so let's just say, yeah, it's difficult to argue with the ideologies, but let's say very large countries like China was massive. Maybe several hundreds of, I don't actually know how many hundreds of million of people it had when it tried, but very large country. Right now it's 1.2 billion, 1.4 billion. So back then it had to be like around half that. Russia is a very large continent, as not well, it's a very large landmass. But I can tell you where communism absolutely does work. A 400 to 1,000 people commune.
Well, sure, but still, like,
And the reason is because it's less complex. It's fewer people, easier to run, easier to this is just a like the core, the idea of you can centrally plan a commune, even like, if you have Soviets and voting and the democratic voting, this can all be done in a 400 to 1,000 person commune, and there's living examples of it on the world right now.
so wait, but we live in like states, so like we could just do that. I,
But you can't. But these don't scale. That's my point.
these don't scale.
Correct.
Why doesn't it scale?
These systems don't scale. Why doesn't it scale? I
Hmm.
have given the examples already. It's the more complexity you have, the less efficient the decisions become, the less efficient the resource allocation becomes,
Well, it
the
wouldn't be
more mistakes you
centralized. It
have.
would be decentralized, right? So like the state wouldn't. Let's say the state implements its own socialism, right? Or its own like mixed economy and governs it at its own level,
Okay, decentralized how?
like in the way that like it has autonomy to itself. Like so,
So like
it's
a
not
collection of communes, a
like
syndicate
not
of communes.
yeah, kind of.
I mean, maybe, but you won't get division of labor and specialization as well as you would in capitalism. But like you had countries that had communes in them to like like a, I don't know, 7 to 11% of the population of the country, which is very high, and then the rest can be capital. You can do that. You If socialists want to do that right now, they have that option.
Yeah, that would be my argument.
Yeah, it was capitalism doesn't stop you. It's like go for it.
Yeah. So well, so I'm glad we agree on that. Uh, but I wanted to get specifically to the root of the prompt, so we can. What
Okay,
was the exact prompt? Because there was one specific part about it that I wanted to touch on.
sure. It was.
So yeah, so social democracy through a balanced economy promotes both innovation and social welfare. I mean, these are just like facts. I mean, at least the social welfare part.
You don't have innovation. Well, so in in Europe, you don't have the claim of innovation very well. You have pockets of innovation in Europe, but Europe basically missed out on the whole high tech industry. That's all the Silicon Valley stuff. There's no like there's no they don't have anything to compete with. And social welfare, if you are economically stagnating, you can't afford it. So that's the problem.
So they do have people to compete with. They have the global market to compete with.
Right, but they're not competing globally. They're not exporting it. They
Yes, they
haven't,
are. They have
despite them
global companies
investing.
like I think what was it, Sweden or Denmark? I don't know. One of them fucking countries got they got IKEA. That's a huge fucking company.
Right, that's not tech. That's not an innovation. That's right. Okay, so if you want exports, the European Union essentially exports cars, oil. No, they have some innovation when it comes to medicine, especially because of the weight loss drug from Denmark. And then you have luxury goods. Those are the strongest thing the European Union is has to export.
Yeah. So like we like you. So
Right, but these are not innovations. Innovations, these are like old industries.
well, innovation just is relying upon like the people having enough like having enough well-being to be able to create that innovation, right? So
No,
for
you need essentially entrepreneurs, or like these somewhat unique people.
how do you get an entrepreneur?
Well, it's ve- it's not easy to quantify that. Basically, an entrepreneur is someone who's willing to take a lot of risk, which we as a society see as high risk, but they do not. And they essentially try to improve something. They try to they try to take something and improve it, or they try to take something new and develop it. Then they try to serve it to the market. So it's like a market tested innovation. And should they succeed, then they improve our lives through whatever they've developed. Usually, what they're trying to sell is something that improves our lives.
So I would disagree that you like because you seem to be putting forth the notion that like all innovation must be coming from that way. But I would also say like there's also scientific innovation, right?
Right. So there's I'll explain. So it's different. The we call it the scientific is called invention, which is like stuff that happens in the lab. And for argument's sake, like that's fine. Like the scientists invent stuff. That's their world,
Well, no,
no
no,
problem.
because you can invent like a product, right? Like so, let's say like for instance, like the I've seen the one guy who created like some cleaning product, right? He was just uh
Okay,
he was just sitting in like in his house, just he had the spare time, and he was just like putting stuff together, and trying to like fix a problem that he had in his life, right?
sure.
Trying to clean
That's
some.
what an entrepreneur does.
So like that's kind of like he was kind of doing something scientific there, experimenting with different substances and stuff. That's the type of like science
Right.
does
So
contribute to innovation.
let me define let me define that in a more clear way. So scientists on the one side, that whatever I'm not disputing that whatever they're doing is fine. What entrepreneurs do is they take what the scientist has made and they translate it in a way that can then be sold in the market. So they're the middleman
Not
between the
always.
scientist and the
So
market.
no,
Usually, that's
no,
the
I'm not always actually. No, not really, because there's
that's kind of the definition, though.
Not really. Like
Okay.
like to an extent you're right. Yes, because like for other people, like you look at Steve Jobs, right?
Hmm.
Fucking Apple, right? He with he didn't invent computers, right? But the way he did it was like he made a lot of innovation or a lot of contributions to like the computational science, whatever you want to call it, like uh community or whatever. I don't know how to say it. Not the best of my
Sure, but
ability.
Steve Jobs, you mean, I would say Steve Jobs follows my example. Basically, Steve Jobs did actually, he was very technical, but at some point, he was very focused on design, and the design had to be um, products that people find extremely useful. And he was very, very focused. So things like that may not be like as contribute to people as it could be, he would just not do those. So he was hyper focused, focused on what he thought people. Sorry, that's not actually true. What he said, he focused on products that he thought were very, very good, and it just happens to be the case that what he thought was very, very good, a lot of other people found very, very good. And he was a
Well,
huge stickler for like for example, him and his wife didn't buy a sofa for like 2 months because it had to be like the perfect sofa, so they just sat on the floor till they found like a really, really good sofa. They wouldn't compromise on how good the sofa had to be. And the same for like a dishwasher. They didn't have a dishwasher for a year because they didn't understand how it could be the best thing ever. They didn't want an awkward one, so it's just like he had this thing where it had to be perfect. And it again, it just happens that what he thought it was perfect, so did a lot of other people thought it was perfect. But he took something from science. He didn't invent computers, and his friend was the more technical guy between them, although he had a very good understanding. And he just designed it in a particular way. So he took the science, designed it, molded it, or had people like to help him do that, and then he shipped it, and people loved it. He was very good at it.
well, I would agree. Yeah, but my point really is just that like what innovation like it does piggyback off of science, right? It uses science
Yeah.
to create innovation that then leads to further
Hmm.
advances in science or understanding as we know it, right? So, like for instance, without 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 Steve Jobs making computers as valuable or wanted as he made it, right? Without like him doing that, then we could have had the possibility that the internet wouldn't have been as big of a thing. You know what I'm saying? Or Bill Gates or
Well,
whoever.
certainly home computers would either not have been a thing at all, or would have taken a lot longer to develop. Because back then it
Well,
was mainframes and stuff like that before he
right,
showed up.
exactly. So like my point would be like because of that we've had a lot of further technological innovations because of the fact that we've been able
No,
to
wait.
use that
First, though,
innovation.
it's you need to look you need to look at it another way, right? So Steve Jobs. So before Steve Jobs, when IBM said this, when was I either went to his boss and said, "Can I please work with Steve Jobs because I'm working for HP or working for IBM? I think HP, and I'm under contract, so therefore." Can I work on this other company? And basically they said, yeah, because no problem, because they didn't expect personal computers to even be a thing. Or someone said the market for personal computers globally is six, something like this in the 80s. Now
Hmm.
the fact that Steve Jobs brought personal computers to everyone on the planet, that's that's the key issue here. Everyone has computers. Everyone can use computers to improve their life, improve their business, and get entertainment, get education, get movies, get songs. And I can even I can give you a much more concrete, an even more recent example. So, when the iPhone came out, I think in 2007 or sooner, 2007, like everyone was really impressed with it, and it set like smartphones in a particular direction. Now, around the same time, 2010, Google and other companies were working on this charitable idea of how do we get everyone on the planet access to the internet. And I don't know if you remember this, but they were working on these like refitting old computers and putting Linux on them and sending them to Africa or something, or these computers where you can crank them to like a sort of crank to generate electricity, so people in Africa can use computers with like this awkward large screen, not even a flat screen, like a CRT screen.
Hmm.
And everyone was working on how do we get the whole planet to connect to the internet, especially Google, because they really, for them, it's search and it meant more people using Google. Also Wikipedia, I believe. But what happened was, without them taking too much action or very ineffective action, everyone in the world started having smartphones. People in Africa have smartphones in very, very remote locations, which they can more or less get internet, and they send money through their smartphones. They access Wikipedia through their smartphones. This is like a huge improvement for all of humanity, and it all started with popularizing the smartphone.
Absolutely, I agree. Yeah, I can agree to that. I don't really have no arguments to that. So, do you think that let me go back to the proposition because I wanted to focus on the second part, social welfare.
Sure.
So,
Hmm.
do you disagree that like that social democracy uh promotes social welfare? Because I would affirm that. I would say that it
I
does.
I think it's I think it's unsustainable in the long run. Therefore, it's not useful as a model.
Well, I mean, I would say it's very effective in the long run because
Well, so okay, so for me to make the case that it's not sustainable, then I would have to say I would have to more or less say that because of the social welfare, uh, I in like a variety of different steps, that social welfare slows down economic growth, and once it slows down economic growth, you can't afford to pay for social welfare. That's something that I'm saying without
okay,
explaining to you the steps involved in it.
okay,
So, but if that is the case, then it's unsustainable in the same way that I could say, look, the USSR lasted 70 years, but it didn't last. And if social democracy lasts similarly 80, 70, 80 years, even 100 years, and then it doesn't, then it's not a long-term proven model that you can just apply everywhere. It has a shelf life, and at some point it will crash.
so
In a similar way that you can say Argentina is crashing or has
uh,
crashed.
I mean, if anything, I think that this is very sustainable because it promotes trust between the. It would eliminate the. So basically, it would take away the exploitative nature of employment, right? Because instead of like going to work to like be split, like you would have that government safety net, right? Like if you didn't want to work at a specific job, if
Hmm.
you could basically like the government would provide a safety net for you to basically go find a better job and to that meets your needs, right? Of
Sure, I mean
what you're looking to learn.
that's advan-
So,
that's advantageous
but like the
that's advantageous to have. I would just say, look, this is like the utopian version of what I'm saying. It's not something I expect to happen anytime soon. But even right now, and I have actually taken this out. If I want to quit my job and then have some money for some months, I can take out insurance today that allows me to stay home for 6 months and pay every month towards it.
So I don't think that we should have to pay towards it. Fuck that. Well, I mean, unless you're like paying
Well, it's not a
for,
lot. It's just a small amount of money.
I wouldn't, yeah, so I wouldn't like if it comes out of like taxes or something like that. If it's part of like taxes, whatever. Because like we already kind of have that for like unemployment. Like it kind of works like that already. So, but I wouldn't want to put
Sorry,
like a
let me. So your contention is who's paying for it, but I'm just that's not what I'm contending. I'm just saying that there exists market solutions for this that doesn't have to go through the government.
what is a market? I don't see any market solution to this.
Right, because the government crowded them out and didn't allow them to operate. But if the government wasn't there, we would have had these solutions. So let's
Hell
even
no,
Bismarck,
no, no.
right?
Hold on, because like if we've already seen what corporations will do when they're like
I'm
not
not
checked
not
in
talking
giving out
about
loans.
I'm not talking about corporations. I'm talking about something else. So um Bismarck, right? Before he instituted a lot of these welfare policies, what happened was with workers in Germany that they were working like let's say in a steel factory and they wanted to have health insurance between themselves. So they all chipped into this pot, the workers, that if someone got hurt, then they could withdraw from the pot. And Bismarck saw this as absolutely not. I want people to be literally dependent on the state, and he regulated that away. But even in America, you had situations where workers would get together and have like a lodge doctor or be part of a sort of group where they chip in, and for like the equivalent of a day's work, they'd have health insurance in quotations for the whole year and their family.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be against something like that if it's just like a day's work. I would just be against like having like a cap on like limiting like how much access you get to these services basically. And
It's with you and your friends deciding that, really.
well, I don't really like, yes, that's why I don't really like the privatization because like it can there's no protections, right? Like so like if it's from the government, then you're like really protected because nobody wants to fuck over themselves if they're gonna need that.
Yeah,
If
but I don't know if well. So I've needed I've needed the healthcare a few times in my country for my children, and I wasn't very impressed. In fact, I was very concerned. We had a particularly cold winter, like 1 or 2 years ago, and
what country are you from?
England.
Oh, okay.
And we I took my daughter to the A&E, which is sorry, accidents and emergency room. Not emergency room like the same as you. It's like it's like if you've hurt your arm, you broke your arm, you cut your arm in the kitchen, or you've had like a
It's
small
like
accident, you go to the A&E.
a middle ground, like to emergency rooms. It's like a sort of emergency room.
Yeah, it's not like the like a TV show kind of people are reviving resuscitating you kind of emergency, like just like
Yeah,
a smaller accident.
yeah.
And on one occasion, she went there for 2.5 hours, and then we just kind of figured a way to fix it at home. And then the other one, she waited 4.5 hours, and they just said we just sent her home without helping her. And then I decided to purchase like oxygen compression machine, where like it gives you concentrated oxygen from the room to your nose, like it's like 70% concentrate. uh, just in case we need it, and we can't, we're not going to get support from the healthcare system. So sorry, so that's like just my own example, but certainly like so again, some people may get really good service, some people may get not really good service. but there was certainly in that particular winter it was pretty bad. I think it's slightly improving now, but I do believe we have 7 million people waiting on lists for operations, and there was a really long backlog for results from scans, from like breast cancer scans or cancer scans in general and stuff like that. You go there like 6 weeks, and then you get the scan of whatever MRI, and then you'd wait another month or 2 months to get the results.
So your problem with healthcare is like the long wait times.
Well, it's look, it runs out of money and it's inefficient, and over time it costs more and more money. And again, it's not like I'm saying the doctors are evil or incompetent or the nurses are. It's just the system becomes bureaucratic
Are
and
you
more
have
inefficient over
you
time.
have public healthcare?
Sorry,
Do you have public healthcare in your country?
do I want public health there?
No, like do you have it? Like what how does healthcare
Yes,
work?
we have fully nationalized healthcare. Uh, we pay for it through taxes, a lot of taxes,
So the
and
hospitals are fully like government owned and everything?
um they're mostly government owned. If like part of it is private, you won't pay for it. Like the government will pay the private company, but it's again, it's mostly public.
Okay. And you're saying it's not sustainable because of well I would
Well,
say
I'm
go
saying
ahead.
it's not sustainable because the NHS, which is the health service, asked for 4% year-on-year increase in funding, and the economy only grew by 0.1%. That's just not sustainable. If the economy grew 4%, great. I would not be having this discussion with you. Social democracies work. But because we're not growing 4%, and I actually believe that at some point the NHS is going to ask for 5%, 6% year on year, because that's just all the evidence points to, then it's just it will collapse. You'll have to like stop spending on military, stop spending here, stop spending there, just to feed the NHS, and then at some point that's the only thing you're gonna have: NHS and state pensions or
Well,
something.
do you have like some type of statistical evidence backing up that
Yeah,
it's going to get worse?
yes, I do.
Okay. Could you cite that? And I would say that if you want to fund these, then obviously there needs to like that needs to be supplemented. And I would say that
I'm sorry.
the I would say like if you want to fund like public health care and stuff like that,
Hmm.
then that obviously needs to be supplemented by some form of uh taxation, right? Because I
Yeah.
mean that's the main way that the government is gonna collect its funds. Uh,
Yes,
so what the biggest problem that we have to decide is who do we tax?
but again, it's you'll. I can appreciate that. I can appreciate that point. But if you're in this, okay. So who do we tax? Let's say in the UK. So the UK prior to this government who came in July. This is a left wing government right now, Labour they're called. And prior to that, we had 14 years of conservative government or the Tories. I would argue that they're not super different from one or the other. I didn't see the Tories being particularly like free market by any stretch of the imagination. At the start of 2010, the Tories were like had some austerity measures.
Wait,
Um,
wait, wait. This is an article written by you.
no, it's a collection of paragraphs.
Oh, okay. I thought this was an article written by you. I was gonna say because I seen your.
It's, it's just a place where it's just a place where I keep all the graphs
Okay,
together.
I see.
Um, so uh, so I would say like labor and conservative in terms of economics certainly are not far from one another, in my opinion. Other people may disagree. But basically, even before this Labour government came in, we had the highest tax rates in 40 years, since I believe in 40 years.
So
and
what's
this new government has increased that even further, and so and she increased it on national insurance. So it will now cost more for employers to hire employees, in particular on the lower wage end. It would just cost a lot more. So industries that hire a lot of young people or hire a lot of people on low wages, those will pay considerably more money, and as a result, they'll probably hire less wages or just give up or move abroad. And who should we tax? So basically, the rich, you would say. We've lost 9,500 rich people, millionaires and billionaires, in 2024. Denmark, sorry, Denmark. Norway has also lost a lot of rich people. In fact, the more socialist Norwegian government has a wall of shame in their office to the people who left Norway because they implemented the wealth tax. Um, and as a result, at a wealth tax is you get taxed on wealth that you haven't yet sold, like unrealized gains, and all the innovative startups that received funding and then became like worth a lot of money. All of a sudden, they're paying 10 times their annual salary towards taxes. Um, so we lost a lot of millionaires and billionaires, and also a variety of other reasons apart from taxes. But it was mainly because of labor or the threat of labor, and that we changed our rules against non-doms. Both parties agreed to do this, so it's not one or the other. Um, and if those people leave, if the 1% or the 0.1% leave, then the 0.1%, so I'm not actually sure. The 1% pay like 40% of all taxes, and the 0.1% pay 25% of all taxes. Um, and 52% of the lower end just consume taxes. They don't pay anything into. They withdraw. So if we lose these millionaires, which we are, we're going to have less tax revenue. But go ahead.
which specific uh chart am I supposed to be looking at here to that
So
you wanted to
the
cite as
so the
like
the second one from the Niskanen center, sorry, where you see like hospital related services go up over time, college tuition fees go up over time, medical services go up over time, and then some go down.
you know why that is, right?
Yeah, why is that?
Everything usually like it's all going up because of inflation.
Well,
The,
inflation should be on the chart, like if you click on it,
well, no,
but there
like
are stuff that
it literally
go
says
below.
cost inflation.
Cost inflation in labor intensive services in
Like,
those specific sectors. So I'll explain. Oh, well, actually, I'm not sure if I should explain because I don't think it helps with the terminology. But the Niskanen Center, which is sort of like a left wing slash liberal kind of think tank, coined a term called cost disease socialism. Cost disease, when something is cost disease, it's basically a situation where you have a particular sector in the industry and it's not improving. Um, like let's say the example is violinist. Violinists will always be violinists. They're just selling their time or something like this. There's not any innovations in it. They're just playing the violin. But but even violinists, their wages or costs will go up over time because everyone else in the economy is improving their productivity. So there's like a general competition over labor, and violinists receive that side effect. So it's cost disease, even though they're not more productive than they used to, and they're not adding more value than they used to. Their wages will still go up. Cost disease socialism is amplified in that the government gets involved with subsidizing and regulating that sector. Now, why does subsidizing and hospitals and medical sector subsidized, higher education is subsidized? Um, so why does it increase the price? So usually when you subsidize something, the government's paying into to like every like let's say reduce the price by 20%, and the government pays the 20%, and the customer receives a 20% discount without knowing it. But basically, because the price is lower, then the demand supply. If the price is low, then more people want that product, and that these particular sectors are labor intensive, and that means they have diseconomies of scale. So when you want to generate more, they cost more. You have to it costs more to invest, to like you need more people, you need more capital investment, more infrastructure to do more as a result of this new demand that the government created through subsidies. So because of these diseconomies of scale, these things go up in price over time. Or another
No,
way
okay.
you could look at
So
it,
I
another way you could look at it is if the government says they're gonna. So okay, go ahead.
so I was wrong about the inflation. I mean, inflation does have to do with it, but these have obviously outpaced inflation. Uh, like the highest
Yeah,
thing.
if you look
But
at the third,
like
if you look at the third one,
yeah, the third one. You talking about the third chart, or are you talking about tuition?
third chart, third chart.
I'm gonna look at the third one. Hold on, I just clicked out.
So United Kingdom price changes 2000 to 2023.
Hold on, I clicked it. It took me. Oh, okay, I see it.
Uh, Either way. So it shows like
So
a similar
like
trend,
yeah,
more
but so
regulated.
yeah, no, this it's not more regulated. It's that these are like industries that have a lot of technology, especially electricity.
Computers also have technology, a lot of technology, and they're more cheaper over time.
Well, things like
Communication has a lot more technology.
let me just look into this. I was more so referring to the other chart with that, but let me look into this chart more. Where the fuck is um? I mean, so you're basically saying that this is just because of regulation.
It's regulation is a big part of it. I can show you in further charts down why. Specifically, these price changes are a combination of it's government intervention as a blanket term, but that includes regulation, subsidies, taxes. If it's labor intensive sectors, then anything like unions may increase prices, artificially keeping licenses like fewer doctors, artificially keeping the number of doctors who pass who are accredited low would increase prices, stuff like that.
Well, I was looking at some of the other charts
If you
that you
if you
had.
if you look I can if you look at the government, I think this is the fourth chart. If you look at the government health from our world in data, the government health expenditure as a share of GDP,
Hmm.
1960 to 2021, or everyone's healthcare is going up. Everyone as a share of GDP. There isn't a country, I think, in the world really that doesn't spend more in healthcare over time. And the United Kingdom will follow that trend because stuff is just getting more expensive. There are more regulations to follow, um, and yeah, it's the example of the cost is socialism.
Oh, so the fourth chart. is because you have an aging population. So that's why healthcare demand for healthcare goes up.
Um, this is from 1960 as a straight line.
It
That
goes
could be
it
more
goes
of a
it goes to 2021.
yeah, yeah. But because it goes so far back and it's a clear trend, I mean, sure, you can add that. I'm not sure if it's necessarily the key one, but I'll accept it as part of a reason.
And I would also attribute that to advances in medical technology as well, because as we
Maybe.
covered before, R&D is very expensive.
Yes, but to some degree, if you have advances in medical technologies, stuff should cost less.
It does. I mean, in treatment, long-term treatment, sure, yeah, but like we're still developing as well. It's not like we like have finished developing everything that we need. We're still growing.
Well, look, I hope that, advances in AI, maybe like, buying a bunch or having people have like a bunch of healthcare appliances around the home that record, numbers about your body throughout the day so that doctors can, or even not even doctors, like AI can analyze numbers over the long term and say, look, you're developing a problem here. You should change your habits there. Stuff like I hope that stuff like that would help. Certainly, innovations in medicine that reduce weight, which is a very recent thing, which is fantastic. Can help with heart disease and diabetes and stuff like that. So these are all positive things that can perhaps lower, or I hope that they lower health expenditure over time. But so far, it's going in one direction. And if you look at like a few charts down, where there's like a yellow thing in the middle, basically the growth of physicians and administrators between 1970 and 2009, you'll see that the number of physicians has not increased, but the number of administrators in healthcare has is like 23,000, sorry, 2,300% increase.
Right,
And
but
that is
this is in the U.S.
sorry,
That is in the U.S. though.
it's a phenomenon with everything with administrators in school, in higher education, it's everywhere.
I know,
In
but
the
this.
UK as well. So,
Well, I mean, I you're just telling me I should just accept this as well for the UK.
well, what I'll explain why this grows. So basically there are more and more regulations around healthcare and how to treat people so that let's just say so that hospitals won't get sued. Yeah, someone sued something, or the government passed like a set of regulations that require hospitals to now hire former administrators that make sure that X, Y, and Z don't happen. Otherwise, the government will come down on you like a ton of bricks, and you don't want that. Or even you'll to be more difficult to get insurance or a variety of different things, and therefore you hire more administrators over time. Things in higher education like Title IX, Title 10. I don't not familiar fully with all the titles, but all these things require more administrators so that the government doesn't come down on you like a ton of bricks. So they hire more administrators, and at some point you have like teachers that don't, the number of teachers doesn't grow that much. The number of students actually shrink, but the number of administrators goes down multiply of 30. And that's a really big issue. And I think that the recent news of that Department of Government Efficiency that Trump wants to open, again, not taking sides politically here, but from my point of view and regulations point of view, this is something they should be targeting.
I mean, I think that if we're gonna regulate, obviously the regulations need to be. I don't think you can just chop all this up to regulation. I think that most of the
The
regulation that
growth
we
of
do,
administrators,
I don't think that our regulation is effective. I think that's the problem, right? I don't
I,
think.
I think that the growth of administrators would be tied either to government regulations, to government policy changes, or like uh present like court cases, civil court cases that had like a very large precedence.
I'm not gonna lie, this is a very
But hey,
interesting.
look.
This,
This is actually a good thing, right? Because you know, you and I, we can agree that I don't think you disagree that this stuff is not helpful. Like you want cheaper healthcare and you want more people to have access to it, right? Obviously,
yes.
and that you know funding for it won't be like such a pain if it's cheaper and as effective. Then funding for it isn't. You know, you need less funding and it's easier to approve this less funding anyway. So I think like we're on. Everyone should be on the same page, and I think you know correct me if I'm wrong. Bernie Sanders is looking to contribute to this Department of Government Efficiency. Cenk from the Young Turks wants to contribute stuff to reduce the military. Everyone wants to reduce regulation. It's just very difficult. So I
Well,
mean,
hold on. Well,
I
you talk about the Department of Government Efficiency. That's just like a made
Mhm.
up. That's just made up bullshit by Elon. Like we already have a department for that. I forget. Let me look up the name.
Right, but Elon, you know, took Twitter and removed 80% of the people there, and it's still functional.
Yeah, and
That's a big
he's
deal.
been fucking using it to fucking silence people and just feed his
Okay,
ego.
so we're anti Elon, but in general, in the software development world, like Google, for example, right? There's like an aversion to bureaucracy, and we don't they don't want too many manage they don't like too many managers. They want like a flat hierarchy in the office, and in that world, there has been a lot of efforts to reduce bureaucracy, especially with startups. You can't be a startup and be like a top heavy highly bureaucratic company unless maybe if you're the only monopoly maybe you can but normally you can't, and a lot of the startups that disrupted large companies, the reason they were able to do it is because the large companies were bureaucratic and stale and difficult to innovate. So these are these are positive things where like software industry or engineering has like a history of trying to keep bureaucracies down and reduce or remove it.
I mean, I don't think that all bureaucracy is bad. Like, there's different like so like as opposed to. I mean, if you're gonna talk about bureaucracy, wouldn't Doge also be bureaucracy?
But I think they want to shut it down after 2 years.
Okay, but that I mean, I don't see how that's gonna be sustainable and make any sort of sustainable effect. But I mean, we already have, like I was saying, we already have like government agencies that handle this stuff. Like we have the GAO, the Government Accountability Office, the
Hmm.
of Management and Budget, the Congressional Budget Office, and the Inspector General. Like these all
Right,
these
but
all play their own parts.
you still increasing there's still increasing federal and state regulation. It's never been decreased.
Well, not all regulation needs to be decreased. Like there's definitely need for regulation. Like I don't want these like different. I don't want them to just be running around here willy nilly, just doing privatized organizations, just doing whatever they want. Because there obviously is need for regulation, and some sectors there isn't nearly enough. Like when we come to like when we talk about like environmental regulation, like we don't
Environmental regulation is actually very high. It's
not
pervasive in many areas.
not enough because they're not abiding by
Okay,
it.
so did you know that if you want to build uh, a road or a tunnel or a house, you need like a ton of environmental surveys
Yeah,
that can take hundreds of thousands of pages and years to complete before even one brick has been placed or one shovel has been put into the ground. And as a result, housing is very expensive. You
If
don't want
you got the
houses to be very
money,
expensive,
if
right?
you got the money to build a
Right, but
fucking tunnel, you
let
better have the money
okay,
to
so
hire somebody
let's
to.
say let's say that there are housing regulation, including which includes environmental, but not only, and as a result, rent and purchasing of houses is 40% higher. Now, if it was 40% lower, right? So people's monthly rent, let's say, went from $1,000 to 600. How much welfare do you think you need to then have the government offer the person who just had a 40% reduction in their monthly expenses? It's much lower,
You
right?
don't.
And
You
even
you
if you
don't.
need to provide
Hold on.
and
You
even if
don't.
you need to provide them welfare, it will be a lower amount because they have less they have less spending as a
You
result of
can. You
housing being
can. You
cheaper.
can regulate housing pricing.
No, you can't.
Yes, you can.
You can, but it will just it will just result in shortages.
In what way?
Fewer people will rent out houses or buy houses.
Why
Oh,
would they?
sorry, or
Why would they
develop
stop?
houses
I mean, sure,
because
develop,
they
but
don't.
renting out, no.
Definitely, it has happened.
But I mean that can obviously, like, that's a temporary. So we're talking about, like, how or pricing for housing going up, right? You can, and we're just talking about a specific area too. Like, what is going to cause this for like 40% increase in housing? Like, my
I'm give so I'm giving you an example with social welfare, right? And I'm saying if you have let's even take Texas and California, right? Texas has a much more liberal. I'm not sure if it's zoning or deregulate, but you can build more in Texas, and it's much more difficult to build in California, which includes the environmental regulations that I've pointed out. So more buildings, more houses, sorry, are built in Texas than there are in California. Both have like a good economy. Obviously, California, I think it's larger, but Texas is doing well. And the house prices, the average rent, I think, is either staying the same or going down by 7% in Texas, the state.
I know
And
you're
with
going to talk
California,
about California.
it's going up.
Yeah,
Sorry,
it's really high in California, but
it's really high in California.
that's not due to their bureaucracy
It
causing
it
rent.
it's due to the bureaucracy. Yeah.
No, it's not. That they're no, their high housing costs is due to the demand that everyone wants to live in California.
Right. Everyone wants to live in California. Okay, so let's look at this way. You had in LA Prop HHH. We tried to build apartments for homeless people there, and they, I think they had like a billion allocated to it, or 1.2. I'm not sure. You can look it up. And they wanted to do like 40,000 or 50,000, and they only were able to get like 7 or 10,000 homes built. And at some point, the homes for the cost, sorry, was like 700,000, 800,000 per unit. Now, the people developing said that 40% of their costs are administrative. Like they haven't put a shovel in the ground yet, and they've already lost 40% on lawyers, on trying to get all the surveys done for the city and whatever they need. So 40%, again, that same 40% number, is an increase that if you reduce that, that means the cost of houses will be cheaper, and that will be passed down to the consumer and the tenant.
I mean, I'm not gonna argue that costs aren't passed down to consumers because they definitely are, which is why I would be totally against Trump's tariffs. But that's like a whole other story.
I'm
Um,
not for tariffs myself.
well then we can agree to that. Uh,
Sure.
I mean, like, I see your point that it's gonna increase prices, but like there's a lot more reasons. Let me even just give you an actual answer as
Can
for
we can
why.
we can we perhaps Can we perhaps put a pin in this because it's just like late for me at
Yeah,
night.
that's fine.
Maybe we can like do it like another time, but like I'm just talking. Let's just talk in generalities for now.
sure. So, I
Yeah.
mean,
So just so that was just my point. But I can give like a more recent example. In Argentina, they completely deregulated the rental market, and I think they had severe price controls, and also you had to sign a 3-year agreement. Like the landlords had to offer a 3-year tenancy agreement. Um, and at the time, with all these controls, there was very high inflation. So if you rent out as a landlord, if you rent out your apartment at this price and you have to keep it for 3 years, and the inflation was, well, I don't know, like 200%, 1,000%, 17,000%. I'm not even sure anymore, but it was around 250 at the very least. Then you just lose money. So people just took off apartments off the market, and then when they deregulated it, the supply of houses went up by like 72%, and of rental apartments, sorry, and the cost went down by 20% and then 40% a few months afterwards.
but that's
So
not
these are all positive
sustainable.
things.
That's not sustain. I wouldn't say that's
Well,
it.
it's a one time, yeah, like it
It's like a
it's not that
bailout.
this happens constantly.
Yeah, I see what
Sort
you're
of
saying. Like this is like it's like it's like
it's
a
not a bailout.
fix.
It's government not interfering with the free market.
But you agree that it's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable that you can't have these huge increases all the time. But if the government is not interfering, then you can certainly build more and keep prices low.
So
You can you can
this is a firm.
you can
Okay.
reduce the prices over time, so in
So
small amounts, sure,
this is
instead of increasing them.
this is exactly what I would be talking about, though. This is exactly why we need a mixed approach to our economy, right? We allow the capitalism to do the deregulation that they want, right? And then when we need socialism to step in, that's where the democracy comes in. The people are the democracy. They decide when it's time to, tighten up a little bit.
Well, you're gonna have to specify.
Well, I mean, like in your case of Argentina, right? If the people were to decide in that democracy, in a democracy,
Mm.
that they wanted to deregulate the market, then they would have absolutely have that, availability to them. If that
So
was
okay, so just 1 second. So in Argentina specifically, you had around 100 years of socialist slash Peronist policies. Now you may disagree that it is or isn't socialist, but that's fine. You had about 100 years, and Argentina went from being the one of the most richest countries in the world to one of the 114th place rich in the world. The IMF the IMF balance sheet is 30% money loan to Argentina. They defaulted several times on the obligations, and it's not great, right? They had like the whole Peronist system is that you pay a lot of money to the unions. The unions are very powerful. A lot of money goes to the government. The government then gives it to its friends and some poor people, so they vote for them. But on the whole, the country got to a situation was unsustainable to keep going, and that's when they brought in Millet and these libertarian free market policies, even minarchist and anarcho-capitalist policies, and he's maintained his popularity throughout the year, despite implementing austerity. Now, what I'm saying that if something like this has to happen in Europe, Europe has to get much, much worse, much, much, much worse before en masse people will start voting for these policies. It's not the case that the people voted for it, it's the reality of the country, and people voted because of that.
well. So here's my problem. My main problem with on like allowing for like deregulation, right? So we're about to experience this in the U.S., right? Because we got Trump,
Hmm.
and he's the deregulation fucking queen. Uh, he's not a king, but like so we're gonna experience this. My problem with it is that when we have a leader who's in favor of deregulation and like that's what they build their whole premise upon, then we also see a lot of like unchecked uh like authoritarian like dystopian like shit go on that isn't really addressed. And that's my main concern because that's where I feel like the social democracy has a real force in counteracting. Like if the people feel that they're being oppressed in a certain economical way per se, then they can decide to make the changes that suit best for them, regardless of who's in office, right?
Well, I, I'm, I'm not sure if that was like a realistic assessment what you just said, and on the one hand that the authoritarian dystopian stuff happens. If you mean like consumer protections and stuff like that,
Yeah.
or at least that's what I hope. That's why I hope what you
I
mean.
mean, it would be
And on the
more
other
than
hand,
that, but yeah, sure, that would
and,
be a part of it.
and on the other hand, I don't believe even for a second that people have any control, or like I believe that that control is effectively an illusion. I mean, you maybe if there's like such a huge public outcry that something will happen a little bit sooner. But I believe that the bureaucrats are controlling the government, controlling basically the government. And in the case of Europe, the European Union is basically like it's not really democratic to say the least. Like as a member of Europe that's in the European Union, like I have no say over anything the European Union does or does not do. It's basically a club for bureaucrats to discuss with other bureaucrats what rules and regulation to pass that they're interested in passing, but no one else is. Um, so I'm not exactly sure where this control and power of the people uh, comes from. But in terms of like, let's look at it in a completely different way, not the socialist way. Let's look at what you can expect from my point of view. You can expect that the US will receive much more capital investment. The US is growing economically faster than certainly Europe and certainly China. Perhaps like some money would also go to Argentina. It's a hot investment right now, but America, Silicon Valley, we have a resurgence in manufacturing. Trump maybe bringing in tariffs will scare companies to open factories in the US. Low energy prices when compared to Europe is another reason to have capital investment. And Europe will not receive this capital investment. Simply nonsensical to invest uh, in countries that have, where the purchasing power of the people is going to reduce over time. There's high salary requirements, high benefit requirements for employees, expensive energy, very tight regulation. It's not a reason for a business to start and then even ask for capital investment. So that's what I can expect will happen. Europe will get poorer, and America will get much richer. That's and so will its currency.
So, the reason I mean, there would be like control from the people. I mean, you say the bureaucrats run it, but like when I say that, like when I mention like control, I mean I am talking about like consumer protections, like the authoritarian control. It covers that, but it also covers things like workers' rights and shit like that, like the pay gap, like minimum wage and shit. Like let's say like I think that the minimum wage is too low. Sucks for me. You know what I'm saying? Like
Are you how old are you?
I'm in my 20s. I'm 24.
Right, so you're kind of starting your journey, right? Like you're at the low end, you're at the start of your career, you're at the low end of like your starting minimum wage, and then you're trying to increase it over time. At some point, when you retire, you'll have like $1 million
No,
home,
no. But see,
half a million in
that
pension, and
see, but that's making me reliant upon a capitalist system where I can't be an
no,
auto.
you
That keeps me
no,
in poverty.
you're
That system keeps me in poverty. Because listen, right? I
I'm
don't
not
have
sure.
a
I'm not sure how ending up with $1 million home and 5.5 million in pension
yeah.
keeps you in poverty. And
By
plus,
the time I'm 60,
you're the
that's
one that
by the
earned
time
it.
I'm 60,
You're the
my
one that
guy.
right, but it's a lot of money.
$1 million? No, not really. Not in America. No, not.
No, okay.
No, I mean, not really. Not if I would not to do the stuff that I want to do. Absolutely not. I'm looking to make some
Right, but
like changes in the world. You
I'm
know,
just saying. Okay, let's just for argument's sake say that 10 years from now you'll be earning twice what you're making now.
twice. So I'm making like under $1,000 a week. So
It's pretty good.
that would that's pretty good. I mean, that would
Yeah.
just be that would be all right if I was to make like $2,000 a week. But I mean,
Where are you living?
I live in New Jersey.
Is it that expensive then?
It's relatively expensive. It's pretty expensive.
Okay,
So
I'm just saying
we got
over
high
your
taxes because
sure. Oh, well, if you had lower taxes, then you could afford more things.
well, it's not really just that. I mean, housing costs a lot here. Uh, housing
One of
costs.
the points I raised.
Well, I mean, this see the problem that I have is that I can't access like we have. So my state has affordable housing, but not enough. Like we have like one in like the southern part of the state, and like that I could like apply for, and the wait time would be like ridiculous, and just like we don't like I have like one option. Like we need way more. This is why I say like we
Would
need
you
to.
would you uh would you buy would you own an apartment in New Jersey if the apartment was really small, but again it would be a lot cheaper, but and you own it.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. If there was
Yeah,
a like
so regulations are preventing those kinds of buildings from being built.
no, I see. I think that
There
the
are these
lack
sorts of plans.
the lack of policy is preventing those from being built.
No, look. So let me explain something in terms of like a developer, like for houses. If I were to make a large house, so if I were to make like a large luxury house, it could be the case that depending on the city, it could be the case that it's easier or harder to get a mortgage to pay for that luxury house. And depending on how many people are competing for that luxury house, if there's fewer people, I won't be able to command a higher price. Again, if it's difficult to get a mortgage, I won't be able to get too many people to command a higher price. But if I make a bunch of apartments, each one very reasonable to like if I let's say it's not completely shit, like people would want to live there,
Uh-huh.
and the mortgage and the price is low because it's an apartment and it's easier to apply for to get a mortgage with that low price, and that low price is a large market of people who are willing to pay for it. Yeah, and again, assuming that it's not completely shit, then it would be very easy for me as a developer to sell those apartments quickly and then move on to the next project.
Yes, but I would much rather that this housing be provided to me by my government, not a private
Okay,
institution.
we're gonna have to discuss that at another time. I'm reaching my
I gotcha.
sleep time,
Nah,
yeah, I again, I think the theme is like like we both wanna like let's say to that the more people have access to good things, internet, uh
just better quality of life.
appliances, pay less for homes, having plenty of money
Yeah,
to succeed, plenty of money for if they need to buy an emergency medical operation so that they'll have the money for stuff like that. We all want prosperity for everyone. And again, I see that in particular direction. You see that as a different direction. but hopefully we can meet in the middle on some issues
Possibly.
and benefit society.
Well, that's the goal of a debate, isn't it?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah. Well, that's why I'm here. But it was great talking to you. I look forward to our next
It was great talking
conversation.
to you too as well. Okay, cool.
All right. Peace out.
Good night. Bye bye.
All right. There we go.